And today we're going to cover residential purchase agreement with a short sale addendum. The purpose of the training are twofold. One is to refresh your recollection on how to prepare a residential purchase agreement. And second, to learn how to use a short sale addendum. So, if I want to prepare a offer for a short sale property, what do I need to know about short sale? If you don't even know how a short sale works, how can you set up your timeline? Short sale means the bank is approving the sale of the property, even though the property owner does not have the ability to pay the bank in full. The bank is giving a discount to the property owner because the property is upside down. When the property is upside down, that means the property is owing more than it's worth. For example, a property that is worth $800,000 but owes $1 million, that's an upside down property. That property is a candidate for a short sale. But that's an extreme case of a short sale. Sometimes the property is qualified for a short sale by maybe $20,000 or $30,000. For example, if the property owes $1 million and it's worth $1 million, that's still a short sale candidate, because when you sell a property worth $1 million, the owner will net less than $1 million because he has to pay for commission, escrow fee, and title fee. So sometimes a property could be a short sale property even if the difference between what it owes and what it is worth is small. You just have to see what the situation is. How much motivation does a property have in that situation? Would they want to keep the property? Or they want to get it sold and invest in something else? Because if they keep putting money into the property, then they have to hope for that the property will appreciate in the future. But if they don't want the property, then they need the bank's help to approve a short sale. How long does a short sale take? It could be very short or it could be very long, depending on the situation. You need to be prepared for 6 months escrow. Depending on how far along the property is for the short sale, most of the time you need to prepare for 6 months escrow. So when you set this thing up, if it is a short sale, you put down a 30-day escrow. The property cannot close escrow within 30 days. I've never had a short sale that closes within 30 days. Most of them is 6 months or longer. Don't buy a short sale unless you have patience. You want discount? You better have patience. If you don't have patience, don't buy short sale properties. Okay? So with that in mind, we can take a look. You know, you fill out your form, you go to the parties. I've already taught you this. So essentially, you fill out anything that you need to fill out, like in previous video. Okay? This is just your standard RPA. And it's the entire package. It's got the agency disclosure. Sometimes you use the AIR form. Even when you use the local form like the San Francisco Association of Realtors, they don't have a nicely put together package like in the car form. So if you submit an offer without an agency disclosure, first of all, that's an ethical violation. Secondly, that's a violation of the law of the state of California. So always remember to check for agency disclosure, no matter what forms you use. If you use a car form, it's fine, it's a package. But if you use other associations forms, it's not a package. So you have to separately include an agency disclosure. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure and consent. That's just a standard form that we use, okay? So it's not really a problem, okay? Wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory. That is a form that it was added in 2016, okay? We know this form already by now. It's a form that advised the both the buyer and the seller that there could be fraud when they wire funds, and they have to be careful. What are the steps they need to take to prevent fraud? All of these things are explained on this form. This is your standard RPA, and on your standard RPA, you fill out the date, the buyer's name, the property address, and the price you want to offer on the short sale. Typically on the short sale, whatever price that you put on the offer, that is subject to approval by the lender. So even if the seller says okay to the price, the lender may not be okay with the price. But that's totally up to the lender. It's a question of how much discount the lender wants to give the borrower. If the price is too low, the lender may say no. If the price is too high, then you're going to say, well, why do I need to take risk on a short sale when I'm paying a market price? Most of the time people pay for a short sale, they want to have a discount. If you don't mute yourself, you're just delaying us. You see what I just did? I had to mute you. How much discount you get from a short sale will really depend on the market and also on the area. Sometimes you don't get discount from short sale. All you get is just the market price. It's not always that you make money from short sale. The market has changed. Many years ago, you used to be able to make a lot of money from short sales. But there are still people who want to bid on short sale. You fill out the listing agent's name, the selling agent's name, accordingly like you normally do. And then the initial deposit, like right here. And if you're making an all-cash offer, you check the all-cash. If not, you leave it blank and put in the loan amount for the first loan. Okay. Now, the D1, the first loan amount, plus the increased deposit, which is 3A and 3D1. The two sums will equal to your down payment for your loan. Okay. Your property address would have been reflected here because you would have gone to the summary page to fill in the property address. The date will be just today's date. The rest of it, for verification of down payment and closing costs, usually I just use the default. Appraisal contingency and removal. Most of the time when you buy a short sale, the purchase price will be lower than the appraised value most of the time. So why bother putting in an appraisal contingency? Most of the time you don't need the appraisal contingency. But especially when you're trying to compete, you put in an appraisal contingency when the guy is already selling it to you at way below market price. Why do you need appraisal contingency for? You don't need it. So you will just say not contingent. But if you feel you need it, change it to contingent. Okay? I don't recommend putting in appraisal contingency when you're buying a short sale. You buy a short sale, you want to put loan contingency, you're not going to be very competitive. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. I just don't recommend it. Okay, I'll put in 10 days of loan contingency here. Usually in 10 days, you should know where your loan stands. But if you don't want to have any loan contingency, that's fine too. You can check no loan contingency. Okay? Well, that's totally up to your buyer, how much risk your buyer want to take. The rest is the same. Okay? Now, many of you still leave this thing for me to correct. Why can't you just do your form correctly the first time instead of me correcting it for you? All it is just check this box right here, 7A1. And then typically we'll just say service provider of seller's choice. And quite often, the people that don't do it right are the people that don't attend the Webex trainings. And for government requirement retrofit, you can check all three and make the seller upset at you. Or maybe just check 2 boxes and make the seller like your offer better. You don't need this one. But if you feel like you need, check it. I don't think you do. And if you're in the Bay Area, consult your chart before you fill this part. There's a chart right here. If you are in Alameda County, the buyer pays for the title and the escrow. If you are somewhere else, like in Southern California, we always split it. So consult your chart before you fill out the forms. And by now, you should all know where the chart is because I just showed you. Who pays what closing costs? And that's in the agent's folder. So please do not call me and ask me, Kenny, what the closing costs are, because you know where to look for it. You don't need my advice on this. Okay? And when you collab with me, I would have expected that you figure out the cost already. Okay? Instead of me, usually I'll still check it anyway, just to be sure. Because, you know, it's easy to forget. So if you're in Southern California, it's always 50-50. And then the escrow in Southern California, because it is 50-50, usually we'll just say seller's choice of an escrow company. Or you can say whatever, like service provider of seller's choice. They mean the same thing. And the policy is 50-50. No, actually, policy in Southern California is always seller pay. So we'll say title company of seller's choice. This is what we usually select. Okay. And then this one here, I can select seller's choice of escrow company. That's fine. And the sellers usually pay not usually, it's always seller pays for transfer tax unless the buyer chooses to pay it. The buyer can choose to pay the transfer tax, but I've never seen a buyer pay for transfer tax. Although in the case of short sale, that may very well be the case. Okay, but even for short sale, many banks expect that the seller will pay, so you don't have to do the seller a favor for short sale because the lender will assume that it is paid by the seller. CD tax, if any, you can either make, some places CD tax is paid by the buyer, some places it's paid by the seller. So you have to find out, consult the chart, okay? And then you got seller shall pay for nothing. This one I don't. Don't make the seller pay for termite work. If you're trying to bid for a short sale, you will lose the bid. Basically, buy short sale, you take the risk. Don't make seller pay for anything, basically. Unless it's something that the lender already agreed to pay. The lender will agree to pay for transfer tax, and the lender don't have to pay for home warranty. So usually for short sale, I'll make the buyer pay for the home warranty. Okay, whatever, $500. And then for the home warranty, remember how you get waiver of your E&O insurance deductible? There are only 3 of them: First American, Old Republic, or Fidelity. So in this case, I select First American. If you don't select any of the 3, that's okay. Donate $2,500 to the insurance carrier when you get sued by your client. Okay? If you check one of this, you can save $2,500. It's up to you. If you are very charitable, sure, check something else. Okay? I don't suppose we have a lot of charitable persons here.
So for Northern California, First American, for Southern California.
Same. Southern California, you know, home warranty, I don't care, but title, I don't want you guys to use First American in Southern California, okay? And also, when you do the short sale, many short sale lenders, because they are trying to, many short sales sellers, because they are trying to save money, they don't want to give you even their stoves or refrigerator. So, you know, you want to check with the seller, do they want to take their stoves away or the washer or dryer? These people are already broke, so they want to save as much as possible. Some of them will even tell you, I'm taking the faucets with me. So, you know, check accordingly. I don't know what to check. And also for short sale, watch out for the solar panel. If there's a solar panel that comes with it, you have to decide what to do with the solar panel because the solar panel will have to be dealt with. The solar panel are usually leased, sometimes owned. If they are leased, you have to deal with the solar panel company concerning the lease, all right? And sometimes the short sale seller, they want extra time to move. So, but how much time they get will really depend on the lender too, because sometimes the lender don't want to give them too much time. Usually the lender will give them 30 days. Some lenders are nicer, they'll give them like 60 days, okay? Seller occupy or vacant property. That's what I'm saying. You need to decide. You need to communicate with the seller how much time they need to move. And if they need something less than 30 days, you use one form. If you need something longer than 30 days, you use a different form. You use SIP if it's 29 days or less. You use RLAS if it's 30 days or more. Okay? And again, please attend the Webex training diligently so that when you need it, you know exactly what to do. You don't have to send me this panic message asking me to help you, asking me to stay late to help you just because you have an offer due tomorrow. It's not my fault that you put yourself in that situation. You put yourself in that situation because you don't manage your time well. You put yourself in that situation because you don't think Webex training is important to you. Now, if you have a short sale, most of the time the owner is living there. But it doesn't mean you can't have a short sale where the owner is not living there. You can have a short sale where you can have a tenant that's occupying the property. If the tenant is in possession, you want to check this box right here. And then it's a different form that has to be filled out. That's the TIP, okay? The rest are just the standard, so I will not go over them. How many days do you need to remove contingencies? If the property is in great demand, you don't need more than 3 days for the inspection contingency. Okay? 3. Okay? All right. You know, the rest is pretty much standard. So I will not go over them. Now let's look at the short sale addendum. You have the short sale addendum, and then you have the short sale advisory. Those are 2 different forms. You see the short sale information advisory. This is advisory form. Probably not much to fill out other than the buyer's and the seller's signature. Short sale addendum, it's a form that you need to learn how to use. And so in this case, it'll be a addendum to the California Residential Purchase Agreement, most likely. And then you got the agreement date, the property address, and the buyer's name and the seller's name. And the standard way of doing a short sale is to have all dates begin on the day that then the lender say yes to the short sale. So when you submit an offer on a short sale, the lender will review it. If the lender agree on the price, the borrower will still need to work with the lender even after the lender agree on the price to go through a short sale approval process, which I said can take as much as 6 months. So if you don't have any patience, do not ask your buyer or yourself to submit an offer on a short sale. You're wasting your time. And sometimes when you have a short sale, the seller might approach you and say, well, you know, if you don't give me some money, I won't sign the deed. You waited 6 months and you get a message like that from the seller. What are you supposed to do? You pay the guy or you don't pay the guy? And according to the lender, you're not supposed to pay the guy. So there's always risk that the seller is going to come to you and say, I want some money. Or else, I will not sign the deed. I've seen that happen a few times already. There are some buyers that don't understand this. And when they are confronted with this question, they say, no, why should I give you any money? It's true, you don't have to give the seller any money. But if you don't give the seller money, what may happen is the seller say, then I'm not signing the deed. I don't care if you sue me. If you sue me, I file bankruptcy. What do you want to do? So just understand that you have this kind of risk before you put an offer on the short sale, okay? Let your buyer know that these things do happen. I have one client, he bid it on a short sale. 5 years later, he's still in lawsuit with the seller and the bank. Do you want that to happen? I'm not saying it will happen for sure. That is a very rare case, but it could happen. Whenever that happens, you either pay the seller the money, which is illegal, by the way, because the lender don't want you to pay anything to the seller. Because if you can afford to pay the seller, why couldn't you pay more to the lender? The lender wants you to pay extra money to them. They don't want the borrower to pocket the money. Okay? And then there are going to be some short sale sellers, either on their own or at the suggestion of the listing agent, who will ask the seller to pay money privately to them to give them incentive to sign the deed. Do you want that to happen to your buyer? Are your buyers prepared for that? I mean, I can't even begin to advise the buyer, say, hey, it's legal to pay your the seller. Now, if the buyer wants to do it on their own, you know, without asking you for advice, that's the buyer's problem, not mine. But I will never advise the buyer it's okay to pay the seller money outside of escrow, because you know why? That's not legal. If they want to do something illegal, don't get involved in it, because it could get ugly. All right? But that's really a small percentage of the time. Most of the time, the short sale do actually close without the seller asking for more money. Instead of giving more money to the seller, maybe it's better to give them more time. Okay? Now, what if the seller say, give me 6 months, then I won't ask any money from you? Can you put that 6 months on the contract? If you do, would the lender approve it? I don't know. Probably not. You know how you work out that 6 months? We'll let it be a discussion between the seller and the buyer. I shouldn't be involved in that. Okay. Now, the standard provision is everything starts. The agreement is contingent upon the seller's receipt and delivery to buyer of written consent to the agreement from all existing secure lenders and lien holders by 4 p.m. no later than 45 days after acceptance. The default is 45 days. Does that mean that in real life, the lender only needs 45 days to give consent for the short sale? In real life, the chances are it's no. It needs longer than that. So, as a buyer, do you want to commit to 6 months or you want to commit to 45 days? As a buyer, I think the best thing is to commit to less time, because if things don't work out the way I wanted it to work out, I can tell the seller, well, you know, under the contract, you're supposed to get this thing in 45 days. Since you didn't get it in 45 days, I'm free to walk away from the contract. So you can put 45 days or maybe 90 days, okay? But as a practical matter, if they get it like in 2 months, they'll let you know ahead of time, okay? So if it's longer than 90 days, the buyer can walk away. All right? If a buyer or seller cancels this agreement prior to the short sale contingency date, that party may be in breach of the agreement unless cancellation is made pursuant to some other paragraph in this addendum or in the agreement. Whether or not time periods in the agreement have commenced. If buyer or seller cancel this agreement prior to the short sale contingency date, what that means is that until the 90 days is up, nobody can cancel this contract. But after 90 days, if the short sale is still not approved by the lender, the buyer can walk away. Short sale lenders' consents mean that all short sale lenders shall collectively agree to reduce their respective loan balances by an amount sufficient to permit the proceeds from the sale of the property to pay the existing balances on loans secured by the property, real property taxes, broker commissions, closing costs, and other mandatory obligations of the agreement. Require seller to pay at close of escrow. Okay. Including without limited to escrow charges, title charges, documentary transfer taxes, prorations, retrofit costs, HOA fees, and repairs, without requiring the seller to place any funds into escrow or have any continuing obligation to short sale lenders. What that means is that if the lender approves the short sale, the lender would have approved to pay for escrow charges, title charges, documentary transfer tax. So why make your buyer pay for all of this? Because the lender would have paid for this. Prorations, retrofit costs, you don't need to have your buyer pay for it. HOA fees, your buyer don't have to pay for it. And repairs, your buyer don't have to pay for it. But there may be some lender that say, well, we don't want to pay for any repairs. In this case, your buyer would have to pay for it because the seller don't have any money. That's what consent means. So sometimes it takes a long time to get this consent. You know, if seller delivered to buyer a copy of the short sale lender's consent or term sheet within 3 business days or 3 days after receipt by seller, seller's presentation to buyer a short sale lender's consent satisfying 1B removes the contingency in 1A. So if if the seller deliver the consent within 3 days after receipt by seller, seller's presentation to buyer short sale lender's consent satisfying 1B removes the contingency in 1A. So if the seller is able to deliver the consent within 90 days, i.e. within 3 days after receipt by seller, then the buyer can't cancel. This contingency is removed. Okay. Now it says here the contingency is the agreement is contingent upon seller's receipt of and delivery to buyer of written consent, and the seller receipt of and delivery to buyer of written consent. What that means is if on the 90th day at 5 o'clock, the seller delivers the lender's written consent to the buyer, the buyer has no right to cancel. That's the importance of that date and the time. Now, this one also says that the seller shall deliver the buyer a copy of the short sale lender's consent or term sheet within 3 days after receipt by seller. Now, what happens if, let's say, the seller received the term sheet or the written consent on the 80th day and doesn't deliver until the 90th day at 5 p.m.? Can the buyer walk away? No. The 3 days does not affect the contingency. So if the seller was lazy but still deliver the written consent in time, by 5 o'clock on the 90th day, the buyer cannot cancel it, even though the agreement says to deliver within 3 business days, 3 calendar days. If by the short sale contingency date, seller has not received short sale lender's consent satisfying 1B, seller may in writing cancel this agreement, or buyer has not received a copy of short sale lender's consent satisfying 1B, buyer may cancel this agreement in writing. In either case, buyer shall be entitled to return of the remaining deposit delivered to the escrow. Now, what happens if you have a scenario that I just described, and the seller received the written consent on the 80th day and deliberately not deliver the written consent until the 91st day? And if the buyer finds out about it, does the seller have the right to say, well, I did not deliver by the 90th, therefore I can cancel? Obviously not, because he deliberately delayed it. He received it on the 80th day. He doesn't deliver it until the 91st day. Whose fault is it? It is the seller's fault, not the buyer's fault. However, what would motivate a seller to do this? Well, one obvious reason is that there is another higher offer, but why would that motivate the seller? Because the more money that is received, it doesn't go to the buyer, to the seller, it goes to the lender. So money is not what motivates, at least the purchase price is not what motivates the seller to deliver the written consent late deliberately. What might motivate a seller to deliver a written consent late intentionally would be he's able to get money from the buyer, the second buyer, directly, without the lender knowing about it. That will be the common motivation. Or he might get extra days of rent back, or he doesn't have to deliver possession sooner from this second buyer. First buyer maybe give him 30 days. Second buyer gives him 90 days. So maybe he's motivated to find a way to get rid of the first buyer. And would the way I describe it do it for him though? The answer is no. Because by contract, he's supposed to give the written consent that he received from the lender to the buyer within 3 days after he received it from the lender. If he received it on the 80th day, he's required to deliver the written consent by the 83rd day. By delivering it on the 91st day, or he intentionally misrepresented to the buyer that he never received the written consent, when in fact he did receive the written consent on the 80th day, and then he got his listing agent write an email to the selling agent and say, hey, you know what? We're very sorry. We still could not get the written consent. It's already 91 days. We have decided to cancel because we were not able to get this thing approved by the lender within 90 days. And if the buyer does not do their own due diligence, the buyer say, oh, okay, well, that's just too bad. We'll just walk away. And now suddenly, later on, the buyer finds out that he entered into escrow with another buyer. And the selling agent did not do his due diligence, did not find out what really happened. Was the seller telling the truth, or was the seller just playing game by telling a lie? Okay, so that is something for the selling agent to conduct his or her due diligence on. Sellers shall reasonably cooperate with existing short sale lenders in the short sale process. But neither seller nor buyer is obligated to change the terms of the agreement to satisfy short sale lender's consent or term sheet. You know, the seller, most of the time, they don't care. They don't pocket anything. So usually, they will try to make the short sale work. Okay? So if the lender wants certain conditions changed or modified, the lender will let the seller know. You need to change this. You need to change that. Go back to the buyer and ask him to change this or change that. Now, most buyers, when they enter into a short sale, they want the short sale to work. So if the required changes are not unreasonable, then the buyer will most likely agree and make those changes. But that's totally up to the buyer, though. Once they sign a contract, whether the buyer wants to make any changes in the conditions to meet the lender's requirement, it's up to the buyer, though. The lender cannot force the buyer to change, nor can the seller force the buyer to change. But I can tell you those, most buyers would accommodate. If short sale lenders' written consent or term sheet provided to seller require changes to the agreement in order to satisfy the terms of 1B, neither buyer nor seller shall be obligated to continue negotiations to satisfy any of the requirements of the term sheet. Either party may, in writing, cancel this agreement, and seller is advised to seek legal, accounting, and tax advice before agreeing to any such changes. What that means is that the lender comes back and says, we want to change this or we want to change that. In order to satisfy the terms of 1B, which is 1B is the contingency above. 1B talks about this lender's consent. Okay, neither party will be obligated to continue the negotiation to satisfy any of the requirements of the term sheet. I explained that before. Time periods. Time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, and other obligations shall begin the day after the seller delivers the buyer short sale lender's consent satisfying 1B. However, time periods for providing pre-approval, pre-qualification letters, and verification of down payment closing costs shall nonetheless begin as otherwise specified in the agreement. What that means is, you know, as a seller, I obviously want to work with a buyer that is solid with his finance. So even though the buyer may say, I don't want to spend money paying for inspection until your lender has approved my purchase agreement, therefore I don't want the contingency period for inspection to start until that has happened. Seller says, fine, we will give you that, but we want to see your pre-approval or pre-qualification, regardless of when we got our written consent from the written consent from the lender. That is the default provision. However, there are some sellers that might say, well, we don't want to give you that much time to do your inspection, because if the inspection doesn't start until our lender gives us written consent, we risk your cancellation of the escrow due to your inspection, then we wasted our time working with our lender to get the approval. So we opt to check for this box. If the seller opt to check for this box, too bad for you, buyer. You have to exercise your due diligence, do your inspection, even before the seller got their written consent from the lender. So you have to decide, would the $600 be worth the risk for you? Well, that's totally up to you to decide. If you don't check this box, some seller may say, no, we'll rather give it to another buyer because you're not even willing to risk $600 or work with another buyer. So you have to decide whether you want to check this box or don't want to check this box. I hope you understand the difference, okay? Buyer's deposit check. Buyer's deposit check shall be delivered to escrow within 3 business days after sellers deliver to buyer's short sale lender's consent or as specified in the agreement. Same thing. The default provision actually favors the buyer. So the buyer doesn't have to wire their deposit into escrow until the seller got the written consent from the lender. Or the seller can say, well, we want you to wire the deposit even before we got our written consent. If that's the case, you check the second box. So as a buyer's agent, you decide whether your buyer should accept this or not accept this, okay? No assurance of lender approval standard provision. Basically telling both sides that, you know, we can't, as a seller, I have no guarantee that the lender will approve this. Buyer and seller costs, you know, this is basically telling you that buyer and seller acknowledge that each of them may incur costs in connection with rights and obligations under this agreement. And it could include a cost for loan application, inspection, appraisal. Such costs are the sole responsibility of party incurring them if short sale lenders do not consent to a transaction. So basically telling the buyer, you know, you're out of luck with your own costs. You can't recover those costs back from me if my lender don't approve the purchase contract. So you have to decide whether you want to pay that money. You may not be able to close if my lender don't approve. So basically, those money that you spend it for nothing. Other offers, and then this is a standard provision, basically saying that until otherwise agreed in writing, after buyer's offer has been accepted by seller, seller has the right to continue in the market for backup. So even if the seller is in a short sale, they accept your offer, they can continue to market the property to receive backup offers. And this one here basically advising credit, legal, and tax advice, advising the buyer and seller to get their legal advice, okay? And that pretty much concludes my presentation today.